Mm. Hello, welcome to the Turret of Pleasure here in the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione. I'm the Lord Chamberlain of the Enchanted Kingdom, Zip Gun, your host for today. And we're going to do a little addition to the I Am That Sucker file. As you know, I am that sucker sometimes, not always. But there are certain things that come out and I'm like, oh, I gotta buy that. Come on. So when King Crimson put out, a 20 CD box set of Lark's Tongues and Aspic, I gotta buy it. When Robert Fripp put out whatever it was, a 50 box set, CD box set of his exposure record, that's where I kind of got off the bus. I said, I really don't need all of this. Now, it's got stuff that I would like to have got um, on CD, but I've already got on LP. It's like $200, right? So on that one, I said no. I may change my mind. But on a slightly more manageable level is the work being done by the Zappa Family Trust. And I quite like Frank Zappa's music, and I think he was a very hard worker, and he documented his stuff amazingly. Like, the guy was really meticulous in keeping tapes and documenting sessions and everything else. So the Family Trust has been putting out boxes, usually, maybe up to 6 boxes, and they're not cheap. They're about $20 a CD, and they're of a single period. And I bought 3 of them now. The first one I bought was what we call the Roxy box, because it's documenting the Roxy video that he made. He made a video with the Roxy and Elsewhere band. Many of us call it the Ruth Underwood band, just because she's front and center. This was 6 CDs, and it's everything they recorded for this TV thing. Needless to say, they had edited it down and whatnot. Now, what you don't get on these recordings, which is not really made really clear, but you don't get the overdubs. Roxy and Elsewhere, not only is Roxy and Elsewhere, there is an Elsewhere. There's stuff on that record that's not from these. But there were considerable overdubs of things like synthesizers and backing vocals, lots of backing vocals. So when you listen to the song Cheapness, for example, it's missing all those really cool backing vocals. So as far back as, 73, Zappa was treating his live tapes, which is very interesting. And on that one, he doesn't really mention the overdubs he did. Later in Chic Your Booty and whatnot, he actually documented, overdubs on this song, none. Or overdubs, lots of them, vocals, whatever. So, he was basically honest about it. And the idea was he wanted to make as good a product as he could. These are more documentary mixes. Now, they've taken these things, they've mixed them. I think they've mixed them recently. And they've not put much effects on them. They're kind of like archaeological digs, if you will. Anyways, I bought this and was kind of mildly disappointed. It was about $90. It doesn't have the Roxy and Elsewhere album on it, which I would have liked because I don't have the Roxy and Elsewhere album on CD. It would have been an extra couple of CDs maybe, but it kind of is. So in other words, this is just the addendum to the Roxy for $80. Okay, you got to be a fan. Now, that's from 73. This one I got actually given to me through a great screw-up by Amazon. Resulted in 2 of these being sent to a friend of mine, and he got one of them. These are really dirty. Now, this is the, just called 1970. And this is the Flo and Eddie with George Duke Band. And this one is not so great. It's, there was a big thing about Roy Thomas Baker being on it, but he doesn't really do much. And his contribution is not exactly something to freak out about. What do we got here? Wonderful Wino, Charlene. Yeah. So this is kind of, there's a hybrid concert recording. This one was a bit of a stretch. And it's also recordings from before Zappa took his Scully machine on the road. So the live recordings are before he really perfected his live recording thing with the 4-track Scully. Having said that, if you're a fanatic, especially for this band, for the Flo and Eddie band, it's got great moments on it. I seem to remember, I might have reviewed this before, and I seem to remember it has a lot of Ainsley Dunbar drum solos on it. Okay, so that's all preamble for today's I Am That Sucker box. And this one I sort of did, I thought twice, and then I went, no, what are you, nuts by it? This is the Waka Wazoo box. And the story behind this box is pretty great. Early 1972, that band, or sort of the modified version of the 1970 band, was playing, and they played at Montreux, at the Montreux Jazz Festival, and the place burned down, and Smoke on the Water was written about that. And Zappa was not very happy, because they lost all their gear. And so they kind of borrowed gear and whatnot. They gutted it out. They went to England. They were playing a gig there, and some nut jumped on the stage for reasons unknown and pushed Frank into the orchestra pit, which was concrete. It's probably 10 or 12 feet below the stage, and Frank landed on his neck and busted his leg and was really quite badly hurt. And Frank being Frank, he's a workaholic maniac. This really did not sit well with him because he was incapacitated. He was basically in a huge cast, and he was really out of the game for, well, at least a couple of months. I think this might have happened in January. At any rate, once he was able to hobble around in a wheelchair, which was a couple of months, I think, he had disbanded the Flo and Eddie band because they weren't working. They couldn't make money for the band. And so they kind of had gone and done a Flo and Eddie band. And so he was left with, sort of at loose ends. And so, oh, it's smooth, that famous grouse. So he built what he called an electric orchestra. And through the offices of some friends of his in the Union, I think, put together a really big piece, a 20-piece band. And he did 2 records with this ensemble. He did one called Waka, which was done under the name of Frank Zappa, and it was sort of done under the name of Hot Rats. And the idea was it was going to be Hot Rats Part 2. It's not really much like Hot Rats. I think it's a lot better than Hot Rats. And it's essentially largely instrumental music for a rather large brass heavy band. With a couple of songs, there's a couple of weird songs on it. It's only a 4-song album. And about the same time he was doing this, he did a record for Reprise, of course, under the name The Mothers. And that record was the Grand Wazoo, and that was with the big band, 20-odd pieces. And that was, George Duke was in that band. Ainsley Dunbar was playing drums in that band. There's a really interesting bass player called Erroneous, whose name I can't pronounce because it's a very difficult Polish name. And he had come along with Ainsley Dunbar. Ernie Watts plays a bit, and he's a very well-known LA jazz saxophonist. Now, this contains, first of all, it contains both albums on a DVD in super high fidelity digital and in 5.1, which is why I bought this. It's fabulous. Really good sound. Lovely spacing in the 5.1. Now, I'm still living on my original vinyl copies of these that I bought in 1972. And they are pretty well worn. They're still in pretty good shape, but, this sounds so much better. Now, disc 1 is alternate takes for the most part. And you look at it and you go, okay, Your Mouth, that's on the album. Big Swifty, that's on the album. There's only 1 or 2 titles that don't connect. Now, I was kind of like, oh yeah, here we go again. More stuff I don't really need. Wrong. These are very different, these versions. You think you're getting the same old thing, but you're not. And there's basically two two CDs worth. I will note that there's the song Waka is one of my favorites, and the alternate mix of that is here. And really, what it is it's the unedited version, because the album version is edited. I didn't know that. Anyway, it's really great. I was really, really happy to hear all this stuff and go, hey, wait a minute, this is a lot more than I thought it was going to be. Now, there's a really great bonus on here, disc 3 and disc 4. These are live tracks with these bands. Now, the 22-piece did, I don't know how many gigs, not very many. And there was some recording from that band. And then he realized he was going to go broke doing this. So he pruned the band down to about a 10-piece. And that's been known through the ages as the Petit Wazoo. And there's a whole concert of that here, which is really great because the playing is great. It's considerably different, and you get a great sense of what it would have been like to see this band live, because I'll bet it was really great. Then there's one other really cool thing on this, and I kind of went, but it turns out it's pretty cool. And that is, there's a session that Frank did. I'm not sure of the story. They're not real clear about this, whether Frank paid for the session or whether George hired Frank to produce the session. But it is a George Duke solo demo session. And this session predates George's first records when he signed with MPS BASF, for whom he made several really good records. And good 70s style jazz fusion records. And this stuff has Frank on guitar. It has many of the Wazoo people. Sal Marquez is on it. And who else? It's basically, the band is picked from the Zappa band of this era. Zappa produces it. Zappa plays guitar. By the way, if you like Zappa's guitar playing, this box set is absolutely a wash in it. Lots of good guitar playing. A lot of his clean guitar playing, which is very good. I really like it. So, yeah, anyway, so you get, it's the better part of a half of a CD of these George Duke demos, and they're really good. They're nothing like what you would expect George Duke to be if your frame of reference is the stuff he did in the 80s and the disco pop stuff, which is in and of itself pretty good in that kind of stuff. But this is completely different. This is us fusion nerds are going to love it. Yeah, so there you go. Good notes. Again, the mixes of the extra stuff are very clinical. They're not very pretty. The alternate mix, for example, of Waka, when the synthesizer solo comes in, it doesn't have that big echoey reverb that's on the original. It's a little drier. It's a little bit different. It doesn't sound as good, to ears that have been accustomed to the original mix forever. But I kind of get why they did that. They didn't want to put their own sound onto this. They wanted to keep this completely frank. So I get it. It is more of a musicological thing. Although a couple of these, I'm sure I'll stick them in the car, and in no time I'll find that they're my favorite versions. So anyway, it was not terribly expensive. I think it was $50. And if you like these records, this era, it's basically 1 year, 72. If you like these records, I would say buy it, because it is really good. And better than a lot of the Zappa boxes. There's a couple I kind of looked at and went, I don't need six discs of Live at the Fillmore era Flo and Eddie stuff. I mean, I do, but not for $100. This one's worth the dough. None of them are cheap. You got to be a fan. I have to say that I like them. The packaging is getting better. The packaging I had problems with. I'm not really crazy about these open from the bottom things. They kind of, but that's a great, like this is a nice touch. That's from the Waka album. And they're slowly getting better with these. Did they do anything special with this one? So yeah, no, this was just black. So they started out a little bit rudimentary, getting a little bit more sophisticated. These will probably come out until hell freezes over because there's a lot of stuff. So we'll keep you posted. Yeah, so there you go. I'm that sucker. Of course I bought it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the likes and the subscribes and all that other stuff. And I'm going to dig around and see if there's more stuff I can talk about. Because I know there's stuff buried here that I don't know. I'll probably do some books. I got a lot of books to review. Anyways, thanks.